Tonight on Denver7 News at 6.
Everybody's eyes are on him right now all around the world.
An investigation finds Aurora police should have left Elijah McClain alone.
And it proves that the police were totally out of line.
Activists say they could have told you that a year and a half ago.
$90,000 for us to already figure out what we already know has happened.
Plus, more fallout from Saturday's nightmare flight over the Denver metro.
We just kind of held each other tight and held on for the ride.
A Colorado-based boating company takes the My Pillow guy to court.
Those lies have caused unprecedented harm.
And play it again, Sam. Time has gone by and left another Denver business behind.
I don't have that closeness that I used to have with everybody up and down the street.
157 pages to say what we already knew. Elijah McClain should have never been detained by police in the first place. And almost everything officers did afterwards was flawed. Good evening, and thanks for watching Denver7. I'm Ann Trujillo.
And I'm Shannon Ogden. Glad you're with us tonight. An independent commission by the city of Aurora finds that police had no legal basis to stop the 23-year-old. The report also questions the use of ketamine and finds Aurora Police Department's initial investigation to be woefully lacking.
Denver7's Gary Brode and Jennifer KOVALESKI are with us tonight to cover the recommendations this report provides and the reaction it's receiving. And we'll start with Jen.
And Elijah McClain's mother told me that she started crying when she first read this report. Relieved the truth is finally coming out. The report raises serious questions about the roles of both police and medics in McClain's death and the investigation that followed. The city of Aurora just released this independent review into Elijah McClain's death. It comes more than a year and a half since he died in Aurora police custody. An interaction with officers captured on body cam video.
No, I am an introvert.
The 153-page report calls the investigation after his death flawed, going so far as to say the interviews, major crimes conducted with the involved officers were neither probing nor objective. And, at times, questions appeared designed with, quote, magic language to exonerate the officers.
Everything that they did to cover up their tracks is appalling. It's shameful for Aurora, Colorado.
Shanine McClain is Elijah's mother. She says the report details much of what they already knew, but says it means her son can no longer be called a suspect.
It proves that he is a good person. It proves that he does have a good character, and it proves that the police were totally out of line.
The report found police never should have stopped McClain that night back in August of 2019. It said officers and the person who called 911 never identified a crime. But seconds after police arrived, they used force on McClain.
Let go of me.
Attempting 2 carotid holds. Shortly after, medics injected him with a heavy dose of ketamine, a dose our investigations uncovered, and the report confirms was way too much for McClain's weight.
That's really why I wanted to have this review done.
Councilman Curtis Gardner put a temporary ban on the use of the sedative in Aurora. He wanted to wait until the findings of this report. Do you plan to continue the moratorium?
I think it's too early to say.
I love him and I miss him.
McClain's dad, LaWayne Mosley, says they miss him every day. He and his attorney, Mari Newman, say they hope someone is held accountable for his son's death.
Will eventually lead to not just the termination of the officers and medics who murdered Elijah McClain, but criminal indictments.
Happy that somebody else sees that they got a problem in Aurora.
The 3 officers involved were never disciplined for their actions that night. This investigation is one of many happening throughout the state. Colorado's Attorney General recently launched a grand jury investigation. The FBI is also reviewing the case. I'm Denver7 investigator Jennifer KOVALESKI.
And Aurora City Council is receiving a briefing on this report as we speak, and we will have their thoughts tonight on Denver7 News at 10. Jen, thank you.
And though the behavior recounted here is alarming, it's not particularly surprising to anybody who's followed the investigation or even watched the video of McClain's detainment. Gary Brode has that part of the story tonight. Gary?
Shannon, and at the top of the show, you said it exactly right. 153 pages simply to confirm what members of the community have been saying now for a year and a half, which is why there's very little optimism much will be done as a result of this investigation. For Lindsay Minter, it's difficult to get through the details in the independent death investigation of Elijah McClain.
When I first, briefly glanced at the report, I got enraged all over again. That anger seared up in me just like it did when we first heard about Elijah's death.
It's not just Elijah she feels for.
And I can't imagine what the family, what Miss Shanine McClain is thinking every time this wound gets reopened and reopened, knowing that she has still not received justice for her child.
The reality is that Elijah McClain was murdered. We all know this.
Candace Bailey believes the lengthy investigation was a waste of time and taxpayer money. She also doubts much will change as a result.
Recommendations give a blueprint of the things that would effectively change the lives of everyday people. And then it allows you to crush that because you don't have to take a recommendation.
That report was released Monday. Aurora police won't make a public comment on it for 24 hours. And that doesn't sit well with Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition member Leanne Wheeler.
Unfortunately, the Aurora Police Department has lost all of its goodwill in Black community with regard to why they say or do anything and the timing of the things that they say and do. So there's a phenomenal lack of trust.
And when I was speaking to Candace Bailey, the topic of protest came up, and she put it like this: why do we have to protest right now after such concrete evidence comes out? When leadership sees something like this, why can't action simply be taken? Reporting live here in Aurora, Gary Brode, Denver7.
Thank you, Gary. Now, as we mentioned earlier, a grand jury will ultimately decide whether this case is tried in a criminal court as well as a civil one. If indictments do come down, Ian Farrell with the University of Denver says this report could amount to a blueprint for prosecutors.
Legally, what you need in order to stop someone is reasonable suspicion that a crime has been or is being committed. They said there was no reasonable suspicion to stop. They said there was no reasonable suspicion that he was armed and dangerous, therefore that they did not have authority to do a pat down, right? So each of those things violates the federal constitution, the state constitution, and state statutory law. If they'd come up to him and said, hey, you okay? And Elijah had said something like, I'm just walking home, please leave me alone. And they went, all right, just checking on you. He just would have kept walking and he'd presumably still be alive.
You will find our extensive coverage of Elijah McClain's death and the multiple investigations into it on thedenverchannel.com.
Denver police have arrested 18-year-old Nashawn Johnson and another teenager for shooting a woman in the head Saturday. Police found that the inside the bullet-riddled Range Rover on West Colfax and I-25, she is alive but badly hurt. Police believe Johnson may have also been involved in a shooting at McDonald's just the night before.
The NTSB is providing an update right now on United Airlines Flight 328. The agency's initial investigation found that 2 fan blades were broken and that others were damaged. A source tells CNN emergency inspections will likely be ordered. Brenda Doan was a passenger on that flight.
It was a boom that almost felt like an explosion, and you knew that there was just a big problem. And initially there was chaos. I mean, I did scream. And my daughter kind of said, Mom, don't scream. And I grabbed out my rosary. I was scared.
And off Boeing's recommendation, United Airlines has grounded all 777s with the type of engine that was scattered across Broomfield on Saturday.
MyPillow CEO and conspiracy peddler Mike Lindell, now the third person to be sued by Denver-based voting software company Dominion. Like Trump loyalist Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell before him, Lindell is accused of knowingly spreading lies about the election and putting Dominion employees in danger as a result. Attorneys for Dominion say Lindell profited from this exposure. Now, he told the Washington Post today the opposite is actually true.
That contradicts Mr. Lindell's own statements in public media appearances that his sales have gone up because of this, 30 to 40%. So Mr. Lindell says a lot of things based on what's convenient at the time.
Lindell is being sued for $1.3 billion. He had been warned several times.
The state labor department is working its way through a massive backlog in unemployment claims. 130,000 people have received payments since phase 2 rolled out on Saturday, and others like Leon Andreoni are still trying to log on.
We are hurting out here, and we counted on this, and we're stretching moment by moment and day by day, hour by hour, and we're trying to live. And we are entitled to this, and it should not make it impossible.
Leon's benefits ran dry in December, and he's frustrated, he's scared, and we are sure he is not alone in trying to muddle through this unemployment process. You can tell us about the problems that you're having with an email to contact7@thedenverchannel.com.
Well, the United States surpassed 500,000 coronavirus deaths today. In Colorado, well, the numbers have improved. 680 cases and 4 deaths reported today. 430 people in the hospital tonight, and the positivity rate is 4%. Now, the low numbers have allowed Broomfield to become the first county in the Denver metro to go to blue status. Now, surrounding counties are still in the more restrictive category of yellow.
The fewer restrictions in place, the more Denver businesses seem to break the rules. 6 businesses were cited last week because people either weren't wearing masks or weren't keeping their distance. And 2 of them, Hillstone and Toro Taxes, are repeat offenders. Coming up,
This used to be our old stomping ground.
don't blame the virus for what's happening to one of Denver's oldest neighborhoods. This issue will be here well after the pandemic ends.
It's pretty expensive to rent down here, and I rent.
Plus, In-N-Out Burger opens not with a bang, but with a whimper.
How about readings in the 60s today? Just about as warm tomorrow, but then comes some snow.
Get Denver 7 news updates on your Alexa-enabled device. Add the Denver 7 news skill in the Alexa app, then say, "Alexa, what's my flash briefing?"